everyone, my name is Jessie, welcome back to my channel, and today we are doing my big ol' April wrap-up. So if you don't know how I do my wrap-ups each month, throughout the entire month I release these mini reviews of the most recent 4 or 5 books I've read so that my big monthly wrap-up at the end of the month isn't a billion years long. So if you are interested in learning deeper thoughts on any of these books that I am going to talk about today, I will link all of those little mini wrap-ups and individual reviews down below for you to check out if you are so inclined. So without further ado, let's talk about some reading stats for the month before we get into the actual wrap-up. This month I read a total of 19 books, holy moly, and I had 1 DNF. In terms of star ratings, I had a total of 3 5-star books, 2 4.5-star books, 8 4-star books, 2 3.5-star books, and 3 3-star books. In terms of the genre breakdowns, I read a total of 7 fantasy books, 5 thriller/horror books, 3 contemporary, 2 sci-fi, and 2 dystopian. For the age range breakdowns, I read 1 middle grade book, 5 young adult books, and 13 adult books. So those are the stats. Let me know if you're interested in seeing other types of stats, or you just don't care about these stats, because I can always cut this out of the video. So without further ado, I'm going to go through this month's books individually in chronological order. And again, since I went over a lot of these books in previous videos, I'm going to give really short thoughts on each of the books, short summaries, short thoughts, and then if I haven't talked about a book in a previous video because I finished it later in the month, I will go more in depth for those particular books. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. I gave this 4 stars. It is imaginary worlds and kids returning from them and having to cope with their real world again. This book follows Jack and Jill, who go to a very dark kind of world, and follows a lot more of their lives prior to them going into this world, which is my favorite part of the book. I like this one more than the first, but still I'm not blown away by this series yet. The second book is All Our Wrongs Today by Elon Mustai. Humorous, sweet, sci-fi time travel book about a man who goes back in time, makes a mistake, and creates a new reality in which his life is a lot better, so he's not sure if he wants to go back and fix the reality that he broke. And I gave this 4 stars. Thought it was really, really fun. I liked the writing style and how he broke the 4th wall with you, and I just thought it was really sweet and funny and different. The third book, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this book 5 stars. I've already gushed about it a ton. If you have not heard of this book somehow, fictional rock band in the 70s, and it follows their rise and fall, told in a documentary style format. Audiobook is excellent. Definitely pick up the audiobook if you can. Love the characters, love everything about this. So good. The next book is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. I gave this book 4 stars. It's the final book in the big Throne of Glass series. Overall, I enjoyed it. I like how it wrapped up, but it was just so long and felt like it dragged for so long. Overall, I do recommend this series. I think it becomes a lot more complex and mature as it continues on. But I would binge this series because there's just a lot going on in it, and I took a long time between books to read them, which is, I think, why it affected my enjoyment of the last book. The next book is Dry by Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. Gave this book 3 stars. Very, very relevant for today's time. It is about a dystopian world where we run out of water and how we would survive, and spoiler alert, it is not well. We do not handle this well. So this is very relevant for today. And overall, I didn't like the characters very much, and I thought the execution could have been a little bit better, but I liked the themes explored. So it wasn't bad, it just wasn't great. The next book I read, The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. This is Russian-inspired fairy tale-like fantasy. Girl can see demons and communicate with demons and is labeled as a witch, and it's very, very good. I gave this book 5 stars. I did a whole trilogy review for this series, so I'll link that down below. Amazing, highly recommend. Starts slow, and then as the series goes on, gets bigger and bigger and faster, and it's just so good. And I love the main character of Vasya. He's like the best. Next book is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nouvelle. I gave this book 5 stars. Love it. Loved the audiobook. It is a sci-fi about a girl as a kid who falls into this pit and ends up in this big robotic hand, and the government gets involved and tries to find all the other pieces of this robot that are underground, buried, are all around the earth. And it is so good, so political, so much intrigue. Highly recommend the audiobook. The next book is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought that this was very fast-paced. It is a thriller about a girl who gets trapped in a snowstorm and discovers that the people she is trapped with, one of them is a kidnapper, and she has to figure out how to survive through the night in this blizzard with these people. Really good. I liked some of the twists, didn't like some of the others, but overall I thought this was very fun, very atmospheric, and very creepy. The next book was by DNF. That was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I can't understand the language. I definitely need to work my way up to these more classics, if that makes any sense, because this language is just too much for me to try to read right now. I definitely need to take my time with these, and I want to start myself with some easier classics first. So if you have recommendations for easier classics to start up with so that I can work my way up to eventually reading this in the future, then definitely let me know. Next book is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. Overall, I give this 4 stars. Really, really enjoy it. It is a mystery contemporary about, how do I describe this? Just to leave it like really short and sweet, it's following this trial about this woman who's accused of this horrendous accident that may not be an accident that results in the death of 2 people. And it's really, really good. The court trial scenes are unbelievable. And overall, I liked that the character work was done really well, but the characters aren't necessarily likable. So if you need to like your characters in a book, this may not be your favorite, but if you just enjoy really great character work, then this is really good. And I highly recommend picking it up just for the court trial scenes alone. They're so good. The next book I read, The Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski. I gave this book 4 stars. It's the second short story collection in the Witcher series, where we're following Geralt, who is a witcher in this fantasy world, who is slaying monsters and meeting new people, and it's a lot of political intrigue in this series so far. I really, really enjoy it. I love the writing style, love Geralt and Dandelion, my favorites. Overall, I think I like The Last Wish a little bit more, but this was still excellent and can't wait to continue. Next book I have a whole dedicated review for, so I will link that down below, and that's the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This is Fried Green Tomatoes meets Dracula. Charleston, South Carolina, suburban moms discover there's a vampire in their neighborhood and follows it from there. It's really, really good horror. If you love really scary vampires, this is definitely for you. It also explores themes of what it was like being a stay-at-home mom in the 90s, and it's really good. It's really good. I highly recommend. The next book is Crown of Feathers by Nikki Palpretto. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I thought it was a stronger young adult fantasy than some of the others I've been reading thus far, but overall the characters were a little bit bland. I wanted to go deeper into their psyches, but I loved the world building and the magic in this. Thought it was very fun to read about phoenixes and phoenix riders and people who can communicate to animals through animal magic. It's very fun, so I do recommend this if you are a young adult fantasy fan, and I will be continuing on with the series, but I hope that the characters get a little more depth in the next book. The next book I read was Stephen King's The Outsider. This follows a man who is accused of killing a child, and there is conflicting evidence of him at a different place at the time of the crime and about the detective who is trying to crack this case. It is really, really good. I love this thriller that goes into the supernatural. I do recommend for fans of Stephen King and for fans of horrors or thrillers that have a supernatural element to them. It has a satisfying conclusion that I really appreciated, and the pacing, while it's a huge book, I thought it was paced very well and kept me intrigued the entire time. So I really enjoyed this. It wasn't perfect, but I do recommend. The next book is Lying in Wait by Liz Nugent, which I gave 3 stars. Overall, I really liked the creepy ending to this one, but I thought it was a lot slower paced than it needed to be. This is much more of a character study rather than a thriller. It is not very thrilling. It doesn't have big twists or turns, but it has an intriguing hook about a couple that ends up killing a woman and has to cover it up, and about how all these different lives connect and come together at the very end. I liked it. It's not my favorite. It's not going to be the most memorable book for me, but I do recommend if you like slower, more like character-focused thrillers. All right, and now we are finally at the books that I don't have any previous videos for. These are all newer books that I've read, so I will go a little more in depth into each of these. The first one, though, is Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the final book in the Lord of the Rings series. It's not really a series. Lord of the Rings was meant to be one book, but we'll just call it the third book in the trilogy because that's how it was printed. So I'm going to do a full dedicated review for Lord of the Rings as a book series, and also comparing it to the movies. So I actually am not going to go into too much detail in this particular video, but overall I gave this 4.5 stars. I love this series. I think it has some of the best characters and some of the best world building I've read in fantasy. I can totally understand the hype, and I love that the movies complement this series so well without being a carbon copy of them. I can't wait to go into more depth into that next video. The next book I read was Messenger by Lois Lowry. This is the 3rd book in the Giver quartet. So The Giver is that classic dystopian novel about a world where they control people's emotions and have a more harmonious society because no one feels strong emotions and the consequences of that society. The other books in this series dive into different areas of the world, so it's not a direct sequel to The Giver. These are different stories, different characters, but they are all starting to come together in this book. Like, you definitely see references to previous characters, previous stories, and kind of where they end up, and I really, really liked this book for that purpose. I ended up giving it 4 stars. They're so short, and it doesn't have the same impact that The Giver did, but if you loved The Giver like I did, I gave The Giver 5 stars. I do recommend continuing on with the quartet because you will find out little hints and tidbits of how other villages in this world operate, and you'll also see some pretty satisfying nods to previous characters that you loved. So I really enjoyed this one. This one was definitely the saddest one that I've read. I can definitely see the themes and the messages it was exploring, and it was very, very sad. But I'm very excited to finish up this quartet with the next book, which is Sun, because apparently that really brings it all together. So I do enjoy this whole series. I think it's a great middle grade that just presents some very interesting topics of discussion. The next book I have is Mirage by Sumaya Dodd, and overall I give this 3 stars. It's a young adult fantasy book that follows this woman who kind of is living in poverty and one day gets taken by the government, which is basically just this monarchy that's ruling over this planet, and becomes the princess's bodyguard, like double, because she looks exactly like the princess of this world or planet or something. And so it's kind of her story about now being inserted into this royalty and having to play this role coming from the background that she does. It has a really, really intriguing premise, and I really love how this book started out. This book is actually a little bit sci-fi as well, and that kind of lost points for me. I didn't think the sci-fi elements were necessary in this book. The only real sci-fi parts of this book were just like the mentions of galaxies and planets in a way that didn't really involve much depth, and then also like the introduction of droid type characters that didn't really serve much purpose. So I didn't think the sci-fi part of this book was necessary. I kind of wish the author had just made this a true fantasy world and left the sci-fi elements out of it, because it just didn't dive deep enough into those elements to make this like a very intriguing world. I don't know. So the world building was pretty weak for me on this one, and the direction that this book takes, it starts to focus heavily on a romance, and that kind of lost me because it started off so strong about this character having to interact with these really corrupt and like scary types of people, and then she like meets this guy and they have this romance. It's just, I hate when the story just starts to revolve solely around the romance and kind of puts every other plot to the wayside. I really wish it had concentrated more on the other like political intrigue elements of this story. So I won't be continuing on with this series because I just didn't love the direction it took at the end, but I do still recommend it because it did have such a strong start and it had some really good elements to it. And some of the characters were very well done. If you aren't a fan of a lot of romance in your fantasies, then I wouldn't recommend this. So overall, it was good. It wasn't great, and it's gonna be a little bit forgettable. The next book I read was Watching You by Lisa Jewell. This book, woo, this was really good. I gave this 4 stars. I don't want to say too much. I'll just give you that this takes place in this little English town where a lot of people are watching other people and they think these people did things in the past that led to some pretty bad consequences. I'm trying to like keep this very vague because I really don't like going into thrillers knowing much at all. So I don't want to give anything away, but overall I really enjoyed the pacing of this novel. I enjoyed the character work. I enjoyed the final twist I did not see coming. I really enjoyed it. Again, these types of domestic thrillers, kind of like Lying in Wait, they're not the most thrilling, they're not like creepy or atmospheric, they're just really interesting character studies. And I think this one was a little bit faster paced and had a couple more twists and turns than Lying in Wait, which is why I gave it the 4 instead of the 3 stars. So I would recommend this one over Lying in Wait because I just enjoyed the character work so much more, and the final twist was really good. This one just worked for me. I really like this author's voice and writing style. It just works. You know, sometimes you can't really explain why. It just like clicks in your head, and that's totally Lisa Jewell's writing for me. So I'll continue to read her books for sure. And then the final book I read this month was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. And this book I've been wanting to read for so long, even prior to the movie releasing, which the movie looks amazing. This book is like 500 pages long, way longer than I thought it needed to be. Overall, I gave this 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed how this book started. I thought it was a ton of fun. I thought the over-the-top, exaggerated personalities of these characters were very humorous. I really enjoyed the first half of this book. Then we get to the second half where it starts to really drag, because I don't think this book needed to be 500 pages long. That seems very long for like a cute little like romance type book. And I also really didn't like how we went from this very like lighthearted, funny, kind of poking fun at these exaggerated personalities to it becoming where you just couldn't stand the characters. They became so unlikable that it was like not even funny anymore. Like, it wasn't fun to read about the extravagance and the over-the-topness, if you will. It just became really frustrating and annoying and just very unlikable. So I loved the first half, but I don't know if I'll continue on with this series. I think it's 3 books total because of how unlikable the characters became at the end. And I thought that this was gonna have like this sweet ending that was like, you know, that had the message of money doesn't buy happiness, because that's what, you know, you would expect with the Crazy Rich Asians going into it. You would expect the whole message at the end of the day to be like, these characters who have all this wealth and all this success and whatever aren't actually like the happy ones. It's the people who just appreciate the smaller things and that sort of thing. But it really didn't have a message at the end of the day. It was very, very frustrating. And so I'm so bummed because I loved how this book started. And I don't know. I'm gonna ask you guys, have you read this trilogy? Have you continued on with these books? Is it worth reading the other books if you've read Crazy Rich Asians? Because again, I definitely didn't dislike this book. I actually really enjoyed my time reading it. I love the first half of this book so much. So I was very excited starting it out and wanted to continue on with it. And then when we got to the end, I kind of lost my steam, especially since the other books are just as long as this one. This just does not need to be that long. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this book, and if you've read it, if you've read the rest of the books, would you recommend me continuing on, given my thoughts? So overall, I don't know if I'd recommend this. I really don't. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think you have to be in the mood for it. I think you have to be in the mood to just read about people's stupid, extravagant, over-the-top lives that are just so pretentious. Ugh. I just, maybe I wasn't in the right mood for it. But yeah, overall, 3.5 stars. I don't know what else to say. So those were the 19 books and the 1 DNF I had for this month. What were some of your favorites of the month? What were some of your least favorites? Did you see any that I talked about that you also have some strong feelings on? Definitely leave those comments down below. I love talking to you guys about books. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time, bye!